fourth graders, today we're going to be converting time, and just like you've been doing this past week, we'll do some problems where we go from a larger unit to a smaller unit, such as going from minutes to seconds. And within that, we're also going to be looking at fractions of time, so something like 2.5 hours. We're also going to be doing some problems where we go from a smaller to a larger unit, so maybe looking at certain amount of seconds and how many hours is that, or how many minutes is that. So let's start with looking at some of our basic conversions. 1 minute is the same as 60 seconds, and 1 hour is the same as 60 minutes. So I think you guys are pretty familiar with that. So let's use that to help us go from a larger unit to a smaller unit. And as you can remember from this past week, when we do that, we're going to use multiplication. So if I'm looking at 3 minutes and I want to know how many seconds that is, I'm going from a larger unit to a smaller unit, so I'm going to use multiplication. Well, 1 minute is 60 seconds, so 3 minutes is going to be 3 times 60 seconds. Now, I know that 60 is the same as 6 groups of 10, so I could really just think of 3 times 6, but really knowing it's 6 groups of 10. So 3 times 6 is 18, so 18 groups of 10 is 180 seconds. Now let's look at fractions of time. So let's say I needed to figure out 4 2/5 hours is equal to how many minutes? So before we even try to figure out something like that, at this, I have drawn a clock here, and I'm looking at thirds of an hour. I went ahead and did groups of 3. So I split my clock into 3 equal sections, and I can see that 1/3 of an hour is 20 minutes. Another way to do that is to think of, okay, 1/3 of an hour is figuring out 1/3 of 60 minutes. And if you think back to our fractions unit, we could use multiplication for this. 1/3 times 60 is the same as 1/3 times 60 over 1, which is 60 thirds, and that's an improper fraction, so I would use division to make that into a proper fraction. 60 divided by 3 is 20. So 1/3 of an hour is 20 minutes, and you can see that on my clock here. Another way to think about it is using a bar model. So just a model like this, and I know that my whole is 60 minutes, and I'm figuring out thirds, so I'm going to draw thirds. And then I can easily see, oh, I need to do 60 divided by 3. Each of these would be 20. So 1/3 of an hour is 20 minutes. Let's look at fourths. Again, I've got my clock here, and I've divided it into 4 equal sections. And you can see that that would be 15 minutes. So let's think of it like multiplication. 1/4 of 60 minutes is 1/4 times 60, which ends up looking like 1/4 times 60 over 1. I end up with the improper fraction of 60 fourths, so I need to use division. 60 divided by 4 is 15. Let's look at it using the bar model. If my whole is 60 minutes, because I'm figuring out a fraction of an hour, my whole is 60 minutes, I'm looking at fourths. I'm going to divide this into 4 equal sections, so I can see, okay, 60 divided by 4, each of these would be 15. So 1/4 of an hour is 15 minutes. We're going to look at one more example. If we look at fifths, I did my clock and I can see 5 equal sections. And I was really only able to do this because I knew what 60 divided by 5 was. I knew that I was taking my whole of 60 and dividing it into 5 equal groups. So that would be like this down here, my whole is 60 minutes, and I need to divide it into 5 equal sections. Each of these would be 12. So let's look at it with multiplication. 1/5 of 60 minutes, 1/5 times 60 is 1/5 times 60 over 1, which leaves us with the improper fraction of 60/5, and 60 divided by 5 is 12. So let's use that knowledge to help us figure out what 4 2/5 hours is in minutes. I know that when I have a mixed number, like 4 2/5, it's really 4 wholes plus 2/5 of another whole. So I'm first going to figure out how many minutes there are in 4 hours. So I'm going from a larger unit to a smaller unit, so I'm going to use multiplication. So I know that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour, so I need to multiply 4 times 60 minutes, which is 240 minutes. And then I need to figure out what 2/5 of another hour is. So let's use what we used before. We know that 1/5 of an hour is 12 minutes, so 2/5 of an hour would be 12 plus 12, which is 24 minutes. So I'm going to write 24 minutes, and I'm going to show you, if you didn't have this right here to help you, we can use multiplication to figure out what 2/5 of an hour is. Because we know that drawing a picture every time is not going to be the most efficient way to solve problems. So if I have 2/5 of an hour, that is the same as 2/5 of 60 minutes. And I can use multiplication, 2/5 times 60, which ends up looking like this. Then I'm just going to multiply my numerators together, and I'm going to multiply my denominators together. So 120 divided by 5, if you did long division, you would find that that is 24 minutes. So now I've got 4 2/5 of an hour. Well, I've got 240 minutes plus my 2/5 of an hour was 24 minutes. So my total is 264 minutes. So friends, in both of those examples, we were going from a larger unit to a smaller unit. So now we are going to look at going from a smaller unit to a larger unit. And in that instance, we will be using division. So if I have 95 seconds and I need to figure out how many minutes and how many seconds that is, I can use division. I know that it takes 60 seconds to make 1 minute. So I could look at this as 95 divided by 60. I've got 1 minute, and then I have a remainder of 35 minutes. So 1 minute, 35 seconds. So 95 seconds is the same as 1 minute and 35 seconds. Now, I'm going to look at a slightly more challenging problem. What if I had 4,290 seconds? So that's a lot of seconds. Need to figure out how many hours, minutes, and seconds is that. So I have this many seconds, and I know that it takes 60 seconds to make a minute. So I'm going to use division to figure out how many minutes is this amount of seconds. So 4,290 divided by 60 seconds. So to do this, I'm figuring out how many minutes are there in this large number of seconds. Now, we've never divided by a 2-digit divisor, but I can use what I know about 60 being 6 groups of 10. And I also know that this is 4,000. These 2 digits together are 42 hundredths. And if you think about it, if I only had 42 hundredths, I wouldn't be able to make 60 groups. So I'm going to now look at 429 groups of 10 and think of that as how many times would 60 go into that? Well, I know 42 divided by 6 is 7, so I can kind of use some estimation to figure out where I'm going. So 429 divided by 60 is going to be 70. And 70 times 60, or 7 times 6 groups of 10, so now I'm going to use subtraction, and I've got 90 left. So 60 goes into 90 one time, and I have 30 left over. So what this means is I have 71 minutes and 30 seconds. So 71 minutes, 30 seconds. Well, I know it takes 60 minutes to make 1 hour. So this 71 minutes is the same as 1 hour. I have 11 minutes left over, and then I still have my 30 seconds. So 4,290 seconds is the same as I can just cross that out, 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 30 seconds. And if you wanted to go back and check your work, because you guys know long division is kind of where I feel a little bit uncomfortable. So if you're like me and you want to double check that you did everything correctly, you can use your knowledge of going from a larger unit to a smaller unit by saying, okay, well, 1 hour, that is 60 minutes, and each minute has 60 seconds. You could add 11 minutes times 60 seconds, and then add another 30 seconds. So I'm going to put these in parentheses so you can see everything we're adding. But basically what I'm doing each time is I'm figuring out how many seconds are there in each of these pieces of time. And if I add them all together, it should bring me back to 4,290 seconds. And I did check my work and I did do everything correctly. So friends, I hope this was helpful. Good luck today. Make sure you are using your textbook because it's got additional examples in there that walk you through the same types of problems that we did here in the video. So make sure you're using this video, using these examples, and using your textbook to help you today.